Hey, UFC fans, the Big D is back and better than ever as we preview UFC 291 from the Delta Center in Salt Lake City. Before I bring in my UFC friend, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page. Golf, baseball, football, MMA, you name it, we've got it. Also, check out the Big D podcast for the audio listeners on Spotify and Apple. So joining us, FantasyLabs, ActionNetwork. I think there are like 50 other websites you write for. Billy Ward. So Billy, we're heading to Salt Lake City, where there might not be a title fight on the line this Saturday night, but there are a couple of interesting and fascinating bouts.
Yeah, it's an interesting card from like a these should be fun fights perspective. It's a little bit weak in terms of I really want to see what happens and what this means for the division and the title picture, right? Because we've seen Poirier and Gaethje both get title fights in the past. They were both interim champions, both lost to Habib. I know Islam is not Habib, but we're kind of assuming we'd see a similar result. I don't even know that either of them necessarily care that much about a title at this point in their career. So obviously we're making this the BMF belt, but who cares about that, right? Like that's just a made up thing. If it makes it more fun for you, great. If not, I don't really care. This one's going to be a banger, though. I mean, we saw him fight the last time. Two of the more exciting, action packed, violent fighters in the sport. Always fun to put them in a cage together, even if it might not be the most exciting thing in terms of titles and what have you.
Yeah, seeing the last time Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier fought, it was interesting because Gaethje tried to take out Poirier's leg, but then Poirier really hit Gaethje in the head.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's kind of the game plan from both these guys, right? Like Poirier has really, really strong boxing, good power. Doesn't really have a weakness, but in terms of a relative strength, it's probably that. Where Gaethje, also a dynamic striker, but really works behind those leg kicks, which in theory should play out better for him the longer fights go on. Poirier did stop him in the fourth round of their first meeting. It's also interesting that this one's in Salt Lake City, even higher elevation than Colorado. So cardio is going to be a huge factor for these guys. It's the one thing that maybe tips me a little bit towards Gaethje, just because he trains at elevation in Colorado, where Poirier is in Louisiana, which is, I think, below sea level because it's a swamp. So,
I can attest. I can attest. Living in Florida, we know what the swamp is, and if it's bad in Florida, I think Louisiana is like the most humid place in the country.
well, and that's what, right? Those are the two places that Poirier trains is Louisiana and then top team in Coconut Creek, Florida. So, I don't know what his camp is like, if he's been training in elevation or wearing those silly masks that were super popular like 5 years ago or what he's doing. But the one angle I have on this one that I feel a little bit solid in is that the later this fight goes, the more I favored Gaethje. Between the leg kicks and the cardio factor, I think that's a tip towards him. But it's a close line. We always like to talk DFS and cash games. You're playing both these guys pretty much no matter what. Poirier 8,300, Gaethje 79. In his loss last time, Gaethje put up 48 points against Poirier. So, yeah, play both these guys in cash games. I could even see a case for stacking them in GPPs if it gets, real violent, couple knockdowns on both sides. Maybe Gaethje wrestles a little bit, but Poirier finishes him. So, love it from a DFS standpoint. Just play both guys in cash. Don't overthink this one.
Do you worry, especially with Gaethje, the fact that he's taken that? I mean, maybe with both guys, that both guys have taken a lot of abuse, and the way they fight will lead to more damage than somebody who's a wrestler by trade.
Yeah, 100%. But I mean, you slipped it in there a little bit sneakily, but that's both guys, right? It's not that one of them has been in way more wars than the other. They're both in wars. That's why we're calling this the BMF belt, because they're that kind of fighter. Gaethje, I think, has a little bit more upside in terms of wrestling if he needs it. And I've been slightly more impressed by his defense lately. Like in the Rafael Fiziev fight, he looked really good defensively, better than we've seen him in the past. Poirier still kind of does Dustin Poirier stuff. Not that he's bad defensively, but he's just so aggressive and so action packed that he tends to get himself caught too. So if they were fighting other people who we couldn't say the same thing about, I'd 100% sympathize with that worry. But how do you pick a side on that? They've both been in so many wars. So what are you going to do?
It feels. I mean, Poirier did have a takedown at some point in the fight, but at some point in the first fight. But what I also remember, there were at least 3 eye posts in that fight. I mean, yeah, it happens from time to time in the UFC. So hopefully we don't have any of that happening, because I don't think we want this fight ending by a doctor or accidental eye poke, accidental headbutt. You there, Billy?
Yeah, I'm here. You froze up on me, it looked like, for a second. I don't know what my side was.
No, I don't know if it was you or me, but
I can just hop right into answering your question, though, and then you edit it if you want.
um,
That work?
yeah, because thinking back to the first fight, Gaethje was docked a point for at least 2 po- pokes in the eye pokes, and thinking with all these stoppages now, all these accidental head bumps, eye pokes. Hopefully, we don't have any of that on Saturday night.
At the very least, we can count on both of these two guys being willing to fight through any kind of accidental fouls or dirty play. We saw, Poirier, I think Michael Chandler like fish hooked him at one point, was trying to stick a finger in his eye, and Poirier fought through that. So at least we know that these aren't guys who are going to look for the easy way out if they do get poked in the eye or kicked in the groin or any of those things.
Do you think either one of these fighters stands a chance maybe at getting another title shot? Obviously, with Makachev looking strong at 155. I mean, I don't know. I don't think either of these guys would be great for Makachev.
I would make Makachev a fairly significant favorite against either of them. It would not shock me at all if the winner gets the next title fight, right? These are super marketable guys. Makachev, outside of Abu Dhabi, where they keep having him fight, not the biggest name. Like, he's not the biggest draw in and of himself. So, no, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they got it. I think there's more deserving guys. I think there's a huge crop of up-and-coming lightweights that I'd love to see get some of those opportunities. But if you're the UFC and one of them has a great performance tonight, yeah, you book them in February or whatever of next year for the next lightweight title shot. But there's also a lot of factors. Makachev is already saying he wants to go up and fight Leon Edwards at welterweight. Volkanovski wants another crack at 155. Aljo might be coming up to 45, which does the whole thing with Volkanovski. So there's a lot of factors. It's too early to speculate, but would not shock me at all if the winner got the next title shot.
Especially because both of these guys fought for the 155-pound. Now they fought different guys. I'm not did
Well, they both won the interim title against different people, and then both lost the actual title to Khabib.
Yeah, no slouch. Maybe the GOAT.
Right. No, obviously nothing wrong. Like, since losing to Poirier, Gaethje has lost to Khabib and Oliveira, and Poirier has lost to Khabib and Oliveira.
Yeah, maybe the GOAT and one of the GOATs at the 150.
Right. I mean, there's no shame in either of those. I don't see how a fight with Islam goes significantly better for them than the fight with Khabib. Not because Islam is Khabib as much as we all like to pretend, but because Poirier and Gaethje are now, 4 or 5 years older. Islam's a little bit younger. Islam arguably has better striking than Khabib ever did. So I think it would be relatively similar to those fights, but you never know. These guys can put anyone out. So we'll see. I mean, it'll be interesting. Like I said, there's so many young lightweights that I'd love to see get a push. The Sarakians and Gamrots of the world over these guys. But I don't know if it's going to happen because these guys make better business sense.
I mean, Makachev's probably way better boxer than Khabib. I mean, he might keep it on the feet, but I doubt it. He would just try and ground and just submit one or both of them.
I mean, it's not even about needing the boxing to keep it on the feet. It's just having enough boxing where Gaethje/Poirier wouldn't have a massive edge in that department, right? Like, you don't need to beat them with boxing. You just need to not get knocked out.
Well, speaking of getting knocked out, I think the co-main event stands a pretty good chance of seeing somebody on his butt with one guy we've seen win the 185-pound belt and coming up to 205 and Alex Pereira, and then one guy who recently held the 205-pound belt. Well, literally half the division has held the 205-pound belt the last 18 months or so. So in Mr. Jan Błachowicz? Błachowicz. So what do you see? What do you see between two of the best strikers in the UFC? Because I see this fight ending in a knockout. I don't know which way though.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like a pretty safe one. We were talking before the show started. This is a 3-round fight, so everyone needs to keep that in mind. But the obvious comparison here is when Błachowicz fought Israel Adesanya, right? So, we know how close Pereira and Adesanya have been. Adesanya came up, challenged for the 205-pound title, lost a decision. My memory of that fight was pretty one-sided for Błachowicz. I watched it back this week. There's a case that Adesanya won that fight. Obviously, Błachowicz was able to take him down, but he didn't really start doing that till the later rounds. He wasn't just, ragdolling him in the grappling. He was loosely winning minutes in the grappling. And the big difference is that Błachowicz was just so much bigger than Adesanya. I don't know how much bigger he is than Pereira. Pereira is just a massive human. It doesn't make even a little bit of sense that he was ever able to make 185.
How in the heck did Pereira make 185 against Izzy? Because Izzy looked skinny at 185. Pereira looks like he's bigger than me.
Yeah, I mean, and Pereira never had an issue making 185. He was never like, oh, he missed weight, he's got to sacrifice some person. None of that. He always made it. But I think he'll be just as good at 205. Just a huge person. And Błachowicz is 40 years old. So even if he's a little bit bigger, he probably doesn't have the strength advantage that he had over Adesanya. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, conventional logic would say Pereira is pretty heavily favored in the striking, and you would imagine that Błachowicz has a pretty heavy grappling advantage. I don't think it's that simple. Błachowicz can obviously strike a little bit, big power himself, and I think Potan's been getting a little bit better in the grappling. He's training with Glover Teixeira. He's working on that stuff, and he's just so big and strong. Like we see it with Derek Lewis all the time. I don't know if Derek Lewis has ever been to a jiu-jitsu class, but Derek Lewis is strong enough that he can just stand up. And maybe Alex Pereira is as well, where Adesanya wasn't. So I'm actually leaning towards Pereira here. He's a slight underdog, the cheaper guy on DraftKings. I think he has a ton more upside because the best path to victory for Błachowicz is probably shove him against the fence, make it as boring as possible, where the best path to victory for Pereira is just land a big shot and kill him. So, when we're thinking about how either of these guys are going to win, from a DFS standpoint, Pereira definitely has more upside as well as a cheaper price tag. We'll probably be betting him, but I'm not sure if I'm just going to bet him straight at, even money or slight underdog odds. Or, do we wait for some kind of props, knockout, something else like that? Last point on this one, Błachowicz really faded cardio-wise against Ankalaev in his last fight. Like I was saying at the top of this one, this is a huge elevation. Pereira picked up a 5th-round knockout in his win over Izzy, where Błachowicz got 10-8'd in the 5th round against Magomed Ankalaev in his last fight. I'm not sure how much that tells us, especially with it being a 3-round fight. But I would lean towards Pereira being the slightly better fighter down the stretch if cardio comes into play. Not sure that it'll even matter. You pointed out how likely it is someone gets knocked out. I certainly agree with that. If there's a knockout in 2 minutes, who cares about cardio? But if it goes late, I could certainly see Pereira taking over.
How much do you even compare Izzy fighting at 205 to Pereira? Because Izzy's quite a bit small and Pereira's 6'4". I mean, I saw the UFC 291 show where he walked around. Pereira walks around like 220, 225.
Yeah.
So Izzy's always felt like a skinny 185. So I don't think the weight cut. I think the weight cut will be fine. I think the added strength is only going to make Alex Pereira a more powerful striker. I guess maybe the big question with him is how is he psychologically after Izzy put him on the.
I mean, he's fine. So the nice thing about these guys coming over from kickboxing is they fight so much more in kickboxing than MMA fighters do that even the best guys get knocked out sometimes. Like there's not those guys who've never been stopped at a high level in kickboxing, right? So he's been there. I don't know his record in kickboxing off the top of my head. I'm sure he's been knocked out at least once in kickboxing. I'm not worried about that psychologically. I do worry about how that strength is going to play against a heavier opponent in Błachowicz, but I don't think he'll be at a massive strength disadvantage. Is he going to be able to bully Błachowicz the way he kind of bullied Adesanya in the clinch? Probably not. But he's not going to look like a little kid in there. bigger, taller, longer reach. If you didn't know, if you were just coming in and sat down on the couch next to me and I told you one of these guys just came up from a lighter weight class, it might look like it should have been Błachowicz.
And yet he's been fighting at this division for a number of years when Bahia's been at 185.
But when I say the comparisons with the Adesanya fight, I really mean stylistically, right? Because we've seen how close Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya are statistically, matchup-wise, style-wise. You know, the first fight, they both got one takedown, which was rare for either of them. It was super close heading into the fifth when Pereira pulled out a knockout. Rematch, you know, it's Izzy's turn to get the knockout, but pretty close up until that moment, or maybe the other guy was winning. So just in terms of style, you know, Błachowicz has been in there with a guy who fights very similar to Alex Pereira. Whether that matters or not, I don't know. And again, he's 40 years old now, which is tough. This is a tough sport to do at 40. Like, I'm 33 and beat to crap just from jiu-jitsu. So, you know, I tend to fade the older guys in fights like this when possible.
It's just a better. I don't know if this is a cash fight. I think this feels more like a GPP fight.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't need to force this one in cash. It's one of those where if I make a lineup I like and with 5 guys in there, I still have Pereira. I'm not against playing him in cash. It will be a priority to get to one, or not one or the other. It'll be a priority to get to Pereira for me in GPPs. Cash games, not going to force it. I'm not going to necessarily avoid it, but like it's not one that it would be the 6th guy in my lineup. Let me put it that way. If he makes my cash lineup, he will have been the last one I put in there.
Yeah, I feel like this is one where you want to have one or the other because I mean, if Błachowicz, only problem Błachowicz wins. I mean, he wasn't that great late against Ankalaev in New York. So I mean, I think it's one we want to see. I wish this were the main event. I wish this were 5 rounds because I think we'd like it more then.
Yeah. I mean, of course we'd like, you know, playing running backs in NFL DFS if they played 7 quarters instead of 4 too. But, you know, obviously not the case, which is why it's not a priority for me. If this was a 5-round fight, I would probably just stack all 4 guys and try to figure it out in other fights, to be honest.
By the way, I just looked at Blachowicz scoring output. Last 3 fights, obviously Glover submitted him, but 62-point knockout and a 27-point draw.
Yeah, but you know, look at how he did against Adesanya when he actually had to go for a little bit more takedowns, right? 116 in that fight. Obviously, he had 5 rounds, so that means he scored 86 points plus the decision bonus. That was still almost 18 points a round. That would be solid if he got 18 points a round plus the bonus. You'd live with that at 8,200. I don't know that he will. I think it's going to be harder to take down Pereira than it was Adesanya, just because Błachowicz wasn't really like beating him with technical chain wrestling. He was kind of just bigger and stronger and took him down. So we'll see how that plays out this time.
What do you think the light heavyweight division looks like? Because seemingly it's a box of chocolates. I mean, we heard what happened to Derek Lewis when he tore his Achilles. So
Jamal Hill.
Jamal Hill, excuse me. Jamal Hill tearing his Achilles. So that's a bummer because he'll never even got a real pay-per-view fight, so he's not getting a big payday. So what do you think happens with the light heavyweight?
Yeah, my guess is this one is a unofficial number 1 contender fight. I'm guessing Dana White and friends would have loved to have made this a title fight, but the guys didn't want to agree to a 5-round fight in Salt Lake City on 2 weeks' notice, which I get, especially if you're then going to be promised a title fight by winning. So my guess would be the winner of this one waits for Yuri to recover from his shoulder, which should be late this year, early next year, fights Yuri, probably one more defense, and then Jamal Hill comes back, and then in theory, if nothing else horrible happens, no more draws, no champions miss weight, nobody has, you know, some crazy scenario. Finally, once Hill comes back to fight the winner of Yuri, who fought the winner of this, then we'll maybe be at a spot where we really know who the best 205er is.
It would make a lot of sense figuring out, okay, this guy's the real 205-pound champ. No interim belt, no draws, no injuries. Just straight up, you beat me or I beat you in the center of the octagon.
Yeah, I would rough math. I would say we won't be able to say that till like Halloween of 2024
Oh
before
god.
we really know. I will say credit to both Yuri and especially Jamal Hill for voluntarily vacating the title instead of doing some silly interim thing and stuff like that. Like, that's cool that they did that. I've always thought the interim titles were pretty silly in most cases, but when the actual champion gets hurt, that's the situation that would make the most sense. But that way, because Yuri did that, Jamal got to be the real champion, and now because Jamal did that, one of these guys will get to be the real champion if they're able to beat Yuri, rather than having the division held up. So, like that, they both did that. Again, earliest probably this time next year, we're seeing Jamal Hill against Yuri or one of these two guys for like the unification of the all the titles that guys have had to vacate.
So it's going to be all the so it's going to be like boxing would be like the IBF,
Yeah.
WBO, WBA.
Yeah, I mean it's been a nightmare since John Jones and Daniel Cormier were ruling the division. Ever since then, like there's also an element of like the best athletes in the world who are this big probably play basketball and football rather than fighting, which means that 205 generally is one of the weaker divisions just because guys this big and strong and athletic don't tend to end up as UFC fighters for good reason.
They end up playing on grass or on the hardwood and not the octagon.
I mean, John Jones has two brothers who are NFL players, and he might be the one UFC fighter who made more money than them, other than him and McGregor. If he was anything less than arguably the greatest of all time, both of his brothers would have made way more money than him in their respective sport careers. So, like, that tells you a lot.
Okay, other than the BMF fight, other than the co-main event, what are you other fights you're gonna be watching and targeting for DFS purposes?
I mean, you made a Freudian slip alluding to it like 2 minutes ago, but we got the Black Beast coming back, man. It's Derek Lewis fight week. That's always fun. This is a big drop off in competition for Lewis against Marcos Rogerio de Lima. I think we've learned at this point in the Derek Lewis experiment that he's not going to beat the best guys in the world. He's got losses to Gane, Spivak, Pavlovich, and Tuivasa. Tuivasa was a close fight, though. Like, either of them could have landed the shot. We were basically just flipping a massive, violent coin in that fight. But now that he's fighting kind of just a guy, are we going to get some vintage Derek Lewis? I'm not confident in that. I have serious questions about his motivation at 38, how hard he's really training. Is he really looking to, continue to be a top athlete? But if he's even a little bit motivated against Marcos Rogerio de Lima, we could see some just classic, he gets taken down a couple times, no jujitsu, F it, I'm going to stand up and then just throw them things at your head. And eventually one of them lands. We get a hilarious celebration, just vintage Derek Lewis. So I'm excited to see that from just a pure fan standpoint. Obviously, coming into my GPP lineups with a ton of Derek Lewis because he wins by knockout or he don't win, and he's super cheap. So the options for Derek Lewis are 100 plus points or like 8. And that sucks for cash games, obviously. Don't touch this in cash games. But at 7,700, big knockout, you obviously love that. So fun fight for DFS, fun fight as a fan. This is probably last shot for Derek Lewis coming off all the losses he has. If he looks bad here, I don't know what they do with him moving forward, but should be a fun one.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I mean, Derek Lewis, Alex Pereira, Jan Błachowicz can make somebody a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of high upside guys like that on this card, though, which is kind of fun, right? We've got Gabriel Bonfim, who put up a huge score in his debut. Hopilov versus Ribeiro. Those are both kind of weird fighters that can do crazy stuff and pick up some knockouts. Matthew Semmelsberger is like a poor man's Justin Gaethje or Dustin Poirier when he's just always in a war. Miranda Maverick just stepped up against Priscilla Cachoeira. I could see Maverick with a massive score because she has a huge grappling advantage. But Cachoeira is kind of like a female Derek Lewis. She either knocks you out or she loses, and she's pretty cheap. So there's just a ton of that on this card. So it's a scary week for cash games, which, not a ton of people play. I always joke with you, we're the only two weirdos doing it. It's a scary week. I might actually play a little bit less on cash this time just because there's a ton of fighters. I go, man, it's going to be a big score if they win, but they probably won't win, right? And there's no one that I feel super confident of from a cash standpoint other than, stacking the title fight and Bobby Green versus the ghost of Tony Ferguson.
Yeah, it's in Tony Ferguson. I mean, talk about Derek Lewis losing fight. The last time Tony Ferguson won a fight might have been back in the Miller Fillmore administration.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and you feel for the guy because he was a legend, but like he seems, if you've seen any interviews with him, not really great mentally at this point in his career. He's 39, obviously not good physically. He also just had like a horrible DUI where he flipped his car over and it landed on top of someone else's car, like during the training camp for this fight, which not a great sign that he was drinking and probably not good for his body to be in a massive car wreck shortly before a professional MMA fight. So obviously, like Bobby Green's everyone's favorite play on the slate. I don't need to tell you that he's 9,500 or whatever. So yeah, he's a good play.
How much do you think you're going to end up playing? How much do you think you're going to play DFS wise this weekend?
It'll probably end up being about the normal amount. Like most weeks for cash, I just play all of the single entry contests they have, even if they're like 22 people, $5, which I think it still only works out to like $200 to $300 in cash. And then I make, if I really like the week in terms of GPP, I might make more lineups. But I've been taking some stabs at qualifying for the head-to-head knockout challenge thing, and I'm just playing the $12 for those because those can cost you a lot of money real fast if you're entering 3 or 4 lineups because it's either first place or $0. So I'm not trying too hard on those, but usually enter about 3 or 5 of those, one single entry tournament, and then a lot of Reignmakers. I'm overwhelmed with Reignmakers this week just because there's so many guys who I already had cards for that's going to be probably my bigger sweat than actual DFS.
Yeah, and how much could you win with Reignmakers?
I mean, just like with DFS, they have what are effectively cash games where the top X number of people score a flat rate. I've been doing elite contests for those where it's if you finish in the top 50, you make $100. But I can usually make a solid lineup for like $40-ish based on the cards I already have. Then do that. But some of the GPP style contests, they'll have 5 or 10K to first place contests. I usually play those at the rare level, and it just depends on what cards I have coming in.
I did a couple. I think I did a couple of rare entries for the Open. I just switched. You got Roy and Scotty Scheffler. Roy was okay. I switched Scotty Scheffler and Shane Lowry and made a few more putts.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, for those who don't play Reignmakers or know what we're talking about, you don't pay anything to enter the contest. It's just what cards you have. So that usually determines my exposure. I'll buy 3 or 4 packs for most events, but I have a pretty big portfolio of season-long cards on most of these guys, and it just works out that some weeks, I have a Derek Lewis Elite that I've had all year, so I'm going to make a lineup with him as a captain because if he gets a knockout and he's your captain, you're cashing, right? Like he's solved it already. So it just depends on, what cards I come into the week with, which determines my exposure. For example, rather than playing the top half score $50 contest at Elite, since I have Derek Lewis, we're going for the 10K to first contest.
Just go for the whole shebang, right?
Well, because he's either going to get you nothing and ruin the lineup, or he's going to score so much that you'd place pretty high in the GPP style contest and then make more money. The worst thing, and I've done this a couple times, is finishing first in the contest where everyone gets paid out the same as long as you cash. It was like 2 weeks ago. I had the first lineup where if I had entered it in the GPP style contest, instead of $100, it would have been like 500. So that feels like a possibility when you're using Derek Lewis as your captain, and I won't be making that mistake this time.
What announce or what potential title fight going for the rest of the year are you looking forward to seeing? Because obviously, with the calendar turn from July to August soon, there are some great fights. I can't wait to see the rest of 2023.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, my most anticipated fight, I'll say singularly for now, is not a title fight. It's Khamzat versus Paulo Costa. Like, one, these are just wild personalities, and the Twitter is already going crazy with them. But two, like, it's a really interesting challenge. Khamzat has had so much success by being physically bigger and stronger than people. And Paulo Costa is a big, strong dude. So that'll be a fun one. I'm actually weirdly looking forward to Sterling versus O'Malley. I think that's a very interesting stylistic matchup, and we'll see how Sterling does in that one. Those are probably the two. Yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not looking at the schedule right now, so you'll probably remind me of one that I go, oh, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, thinking O'Malley, then Shane against Amanda Lemos. Yeah, why
I'm
can't we have
actually,
one of those? Why can't we have one of those fights on Saturday night?
I'm actually and partially this is my Rainmaker bias. I think Amanda Lemos might be like my biggest Rainmaker position. I have like 3 elites of her and a bunch of rares. So excited about that. She has huge power. I'm legitimately excited for that one. That's a good call. I'm kind of scrolling the schedule here. There's no main event announced for 293 in Australia, but we've got Tai Tuivasa coming back. We'll always watch it. I'll watch Tai Tuivasa fight anyone, anywhere, if simply for the walkout and all the other silliness that comes with it. But, we're probably going to get Adesanya back on that card. Would love, love, love it if DDP is ready by then. Don't think it's going to happen. It'll probably be Sean Strickland, which I don't really care about. But if we got Adesanya versus DDP, would be incredible. I think DDP actually gives him a hard time. I'm not saying he's going to win. Don't clip this out and, at Old Takes exposed me. I'm just saying I think it'll be a better fight than we've seen from Adesanya lately.
You're saying Jones Miocic 295 doesn't intrigue your attention?
No. We know how that's going to go. Come on, Dylan.
If John Jones is just half engaged, it's not going to last long at MSG,
Stipe
right?
Miocic is like a 96-year-old fireman at this point. Like I love Stipe. He had a great career. I'm not trying to denigrate what he has done, but he was basically retired. He's coming back. They're giving him a big bag. This is going to be his retirement fund. I hope he enjoys it. I hope he comes out of it unscathed. I hope his wife and kids are there and he goes home and has a nice career after this. But come on.
He might go. Yeah, he might go home with his head hurting.
I mean, listen, you kind of expect to have a headache after a professional MMA fight against anyone, much less John Jones. I'm not worried about that. But yeah, love Stipe, great career. Seems like a great guy as well, which is sometimes rare in this ridiculous sport. But come on.
All right, Billy. Thanks for hopping on. Hopefully, we bring home the bacon, and your Rainmakers codes will bring home plenty of bang for your bucks.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sure we'll be talking about cash game strategy throughout the week.